have new developments to a shocking story. A beloved local teacher from a well-known private school is murdered by a man who broke into her home. She called 911 during that brutal assault and later died at the hospital. Thank you for being with us. I'm Dan Haggerty. The suspect is a man who was living in the woods nearby with a lengthy criminal record that included violent and nonviolent crimes and had a record of mental illness. The DA tried to get him mandatory mental health care, but the system set him free. This case underscores some gaps in our justice system that have been blamed for tragic deaths, including the murder of Irina Zarutska, who was stabbed and killed on a light rail train in Charlotte at random by a man she never met who had a long rap sheet and a history of mental health problems, a man who was out on cashless bail when he killed her. Her murder led to changes in the law called Irina's Law, and people are wondering why that new law did not help prevent this tragedy. Let's get into the criminal history of Ryan Camacho, starting with his most recent arrest: breaking and entering, larceny, and property damage. He stole some porch pillows from one home and he broke windows in another, and those are minor crimes, but it's what happened in court that is most important here. The judge at the time ruled that he was mentally unfit to stand trial, that he couldn't understand what was happening or communicate with his lawyer. So the DA dropped the charges, but not before asking the judge for an involuntary commitment, an IVC, to which the judge said no. So you might hear that and think, so wait, the judge decided that Camacho was mentally unfit enough to avoid responsibility for these crimes, but still fit enough to then walk free in society. Now, keep in mind, this is a man who has been arrested more than 20 times, charges including speeding, assault, stalking, trespassing, larceny, property damage, breaking and entering. In 2018, he shot a gun into an occupied property with people inside and got sentenced to prison for that. In 2021, he tried to escape that prison and was caught. We interviewed a man who says he was harassed and stalked by Camacho. We have video of Camacho standing on the man's car and smashing it with a rock. After all of this, we find ourselves here today as the community mourns the life of a beloved science teacher, Zoe Welsh, who police say Camacho brutally killed. I'm joined now by senior investigative producer Randall Kerr. He has uncovered some big developments in this story today, and we want to hear what you found out. We outlined his most recent arrest and the decision to set him free and the consequences that we saw from that. But it is important to state it's not the first time that it seems as though the system may have failed here. Tell us about what you learned from this arrest out of Durham over the summer.
Absolutely, yeah. So anytime we see a case like this, Dan, the first thing that I do is look at the suspect's background, the entire criminal record, did this in the Charlotte case and found out that at least by the books, the Charlotte case, the suspect was handled correctly by the law that was in place at the time. So I've been digging through Mr. Camacho's record, and what I found is fairly typical in a lot of cases. People charged with a lot of misdemeanors, cases get consolidated, but this did raise a red flag to me, and we're asking questions of the DA's office now. So in April of last year, he was charged with 4 felonies in 2 separate cases. There were 2 felony breaking and enterings, felony larceny. One of the breaking and enterings included an asterisk, an extra charge that was to terrorize an individual because there was a woman home at the time. So this was April. In July, the DA's office consolidated all 4 cases, so 4 misdemeanors, and they allowed Mr. Camacho to plead guilty to a single misdemeanor breaking and entering. So 4 felonies went down to 1 misdemeanor. And look, DA's offices plead down cases all the time. The workload is tremendous. They can't take everything to trial, and they try to get cases in and out of the system as quickly as possible. So in his case, the misdemeanor plea deal meant based on his previous conviction record, and remember that's important here too. It's not how many times he's been charged, it's how many times he's been convicted. Based on his record level, that misdemeanor is 120 days in jail. He had already been in jail for almost 120 days awaiting trial on these charges. So that was essentially the end of the case. If the DA's office had decided to plead this case down to say just 1 felony of the 4, doesn't matter which one, because they were all the same class felony, Class H, the presumptive range for that sentencing in North Carolina, and sentencing ranges are set in North Carolina. Judges have to follow how many times someone's been convicted, how many points that conviction's worth, and then there's essentially a spreadsheet that they follow to decide how much to sentence them. The presumptive range is kind of the average normal sentencing range. One of those felonies would have been 8 to 10 months. 8 to 10 months would have put him, if it was a July conviction, you can do the math, it would have put him in jail until at least this April or longer. What if it was all 4 felonies they decided to prosecute him on based on his lengthy record, not lengthy convictions? That's 3 years. So we are asking, A, why was this case handled that way? And how common is it for that office to plead 4 felonies down to a misdemeanor, which does seem a little strange.
It's also going to be jarring to people to hear the parallels of the stories, because he's accused of breaking and entering into a home with a woman inside. And that's the very story we're talking about here with Zoe Welsh, where she lost her life. So we're looking at the one angle when it comes to, how was that handled to make sure that he was being accountable for these crimes that were alleged. The other is his mental fitness, right?
And our Monica Casey has attempted to reach out to the woman involved in that case to see if she has anything to say. We have not heard back from her yet.
When it comes to whether or not he should have one of these IVCs, right, be institutionalized here for his mental well-being, we got an email from a viewer, Sheila, and she said, the man, when he was judged unfit to stand trial, should have been put away in a mental institution until he was judged fit to live in society. And I think it's important to explain to people how that system works, because just because somebody is deemed unfit to stand trial doesn't mean that they then can automatically be committed. Those are 2 very different thresholds. Can you explain how that works?
Yeah, and it's actually a fairly simple thing here. Not being able to defend yourself properly in criminal court is one thing. That can be just rationalization. You don't have the capacity to process that. For an IVC commitment, it has to be proven that you are a threat to yourself, previous suicides, previous mutilation, or a threat to others. And you have this recent break-in, in Durham where the woman was there. Well, that was pleaded down. So is a judge going to consider that? Is that a threat to somebody? The incident you mentioned was shooting into the house. There's no hard and fast definition in general statutes of what being a threat to someone else is. There are kind of guidelines, and one of them is, a threat in the relevant past. That was 7 years ago. It's in the past. It's relevant, but is it in the relevant past? 7 years is a long time. And so, a judge has to cross one of those thresholds to commit somebody in North Carolina. It's not as simple as, we just think you need to get some help, so we're going to commit you. There's got to be much more.
We often know that judges will look at these on a case-by-case basis as well. So it's possible that the judge was looking just at the misdemeanor charges before him, looking at the stolen pillows and broken windows, and not this longer kind of body of work. It brings us, though, to questions about Arena's law. So people are wondering, wait a minute, I thought this law was supposed to prevent this very thing. Let's talk about how that law could potentially have helped. And one of the little asterisks that we have to put next to it, and it's just the timing of how everything happened based on when that law went into effect and when the crimes were committed, most recently by Camacho.
Absolutely. So, the bill was passed last year. It was signed into law in October. It did not take effect until December. And it clearly states that the provisions in Arena's law, the provisions that you can never say would have prevented this, but certainly offer the judicial system a little more power to try to prevent something like this from happening. The bottom line is, that law states it only applies to crimes committed on or after December 1st of 2025. The issues that we're investigating today in Durham happened in April of 2025. The case concluded in December, then the Wake County case concluded in December. the Durham case in July. But based on the dates of the crimes in both of those cases,
Arenas law was not technically in effect yet.
Never,
in fact,
not even in play.
And
can't be.
Right. By law, they have to go by what is on the books at the time.
Judge can't say, you know what, this law would have helped here, will help here, so I'm going to go ahead and use it early. You can't do that.
So we're looking at changes in procedure, but even with those changes in place, and even if things do go better with Arenas law now on the books, we really don't have the infrastructure to execute some of the things we're hoping to do. There was another viewer named Herb who wrote in and said, I grew up during World War II, so the consensus was different. If someone was judged to not be of sound mind, there was a mental institution to take care of him. And Lisa said, these facilities have diminished, and our prison sometimes becomes those facilities. And we know that. We know that we have seen different facilities close, others open. We know that prisons have complained about the burden that they have had to carry when it comes to rehabilitating people who are suffering from mental illness. Tell me, if a judge issues an IVC and that goes through, if someone is committed in that way, what does that even look like right now in the state?
Yeah, we're still not in a good place. And look, we've done stories when you hear, there are a lot of people glance over it when they hear this concern. We don't have enough mental health beds in North Carolina, and we haven't for years, and it's only gotten worse since COVID, when a lot of people dealt with a lot more mental health. The state still operates its own mental health hospitals. The stay in those, the wait for those beds, we're counting in weeks, not days, just to get in. Okay, so where are you in between there? If you're facing criminal charges, like you mentioned, are you sitting in jail? Are there any services in jail? Are you sitting in an emergency room, which is a complaint we've also heard from hospitals, that they feel like they've kind of become the dumping ground for some of these privately initiated involuntary commitment cases. You get in, you get evaluated. It could be, depending on, whatever cycle a facility's on, you could be there for 4 days, you could be there for 10. If you have, if they discover serious mental health issues, they'll keep you there for longer. But like you mentioned, especially in Mr. Camacho's case, a judge looking at someone that stole pillows, knowing that the strain is on the system and there's a lot of need for serious cases, he may have looked at Mr. Camacho's and said, stealing pillows, under the microscope is not a serious threat to anybody. And so, judges are in, they're put between a hard place because there just aren't enough beds.
And we did talk to a former judge today who said that they get these requests, these IVC requests, almost every single day. So if you're thinking about the need that is there and the requests that are being made, there's certainly a burden. And then we are seeing kind of glaring concerns on almost every single level of this. We still have a lot of unanswered questions. I think a big one is kind of from the beginning, where this where Camacho was living in the woods near this neighborhood, and some questions about, did anyone come in contact with him? Was law enforcement called? Did anyone talk to him and see maybe what his mental state was at that time? And even so, what options do people have, do neighbors have, if they do have these types of concerns? Because frankly, you cannot throw someone in jail simply for being homeless. You cannot commit someone to a mental institution just for being homeless.
Correct. So we've heard complaints that RPD was called out with concerns about not just him, but a lot of homeless activity in this area. But some concerns about his behavior particularly. So we've requested what kind of calls for service went out there, what kind of response went out there, if any. Was it officers? Was it, a special mental health unit that RPD utilizes in a lot of cases? So we have requested those records. We're just waiting for them.
We also know that jails and prisons have changed the way that they do things in terms of the services they provide for mental health. And, he spent significant time in jail and in prison. And I'm curious about maybe some of the care or observations that were made during his time there. And I know that's difficult because of HIPAA laws.
Yeah, getting answers to that's going to be tough. And look, prisons and jails weren't built to be mental health hospitals. They're there for punishment. But, in this case, and Mr. Camacho's not alone, he essentially was in jail or in the prison system for the better part of 3-4 years because he would get charged with these misdemeanors that you mentioned earlier. He couldn't afford to bail out, to bond out. He didn't have the money. He was homeless. So he essentially would sit in jail awaiting trial, and then whether through plea deal or getting just regular convictions or guilty pleas which happened in many of his cases, based on his record level and the fact that most of his convictions were misdemeanors, the time he'd already spent in jail awaiting trial essentially was it. So he didn't have a lot of outside time in the world. So what, if any, care he received in jail behind bars is a big question. We know that some counties, like I mentioned earlier, do have mental health programs to at least provide cursory services to people. But certainly a question we're asking, and if our local jails don't have it, why?
All right. Thank you, Sir Randall. We know you and your team are continue to look for answers to these questions. Thank you to all of our viewers and listeners for your interest in this story and your interest in making the system better. We cover this type of content in depth at 7 o'clock regularly. And as you can see, we use viewer questions and feedback to help us, to help guide us on that path. So please keep that type of input coming into our newsroom. You can email 7 p.m. at WRAL.com. Tell us what you think about this story or anything else that you want to see the news cover. We thank you for listening here. Tune into our evening newscasts for the very latest.